Carney, are you and Canada going to resume negotiations?
No. Welcome back to the show. My name's Mark Nixon. Imagine this. Your boss doesn't speak to your biggest customer in 5 months. The one where you do 80% of your business with. No emails, no phone calls, absolutely nothing. And then when you catch your boss and say, hey, we haven't spoken to our biggest customer in 5 months, your boss lies through his teeth and says everything is completely under control. Oh, wait. The problem is this is not your boss. This is the Prime Minister of Canada, Mark Carney, and the Liberals on U.S. negotiations and trade. Welcome to the most unhinged power grab in Canadian history, where the Liberals have stacked the deck in their committee so that they could ram through their George Orwell 1984 bills without any debate or scrutiny whatsoever. They claim this is democracy. No, this is not democracy. This is a mockery of democracy. Let's get into this report. Mark Carney's the most conflicted prime minister in Canadian history. He has all of these stocks in Brookfield and everything else, 104 conflicts of interest. Oh, don't worry. He just put it into a blind trust that he knows every single stock that's in there and he hasn't sold a damn thing. Check out the difference between Mark Carney and Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary in the U.S.
So what are they?
Look, Stephanie, I follow the rules of the Ethics Commissioner.
With Canadians not being aware of what potential conflicts of interest you
What
sought to
possible
avoid.
conflict would you have, Stephanie? Stephanie, I'm complying with the rules. I'm complying with the rules in advance. Point for you.
There's no possible conflict of interest in your assets. It's very difficult to believe.
Look inside yourself, Rosemary. Look inside yourself, Rosemary.
A lot of people did very well in the stock market, I assume, and I assume that you probably were one of them, and good for you.
That would be an incorrect assumption because I had to sell all my stocks to become Treasury Secretary.
You sold them all?
Had
Really?
to, yes.
But you have a blind trust, I would imagine.
There's no such thing as a blind trust.
This is the biggest problem with Canada. How could you have a leader of a country that is so conflicted that every single decision he makes could enrich himself? You think he's going to be doing the right thing for you? Or will he be doing the right thing for his portfolio? For example, Canadian firm chemical Brookfield signs an $80 billion U.S. nuclear reactor deal with the U.S. government. He's tied in with Donald Trump doing an $80 billion deal for his Brookfield. What about the deal with Brookfield? Because Cameco and Brookfield are tied together. I believe Brookfield owns 51% of the company. Signs a $2.6 billion trade deal with India. Again, he is getting filthy rich from his position as Prime Minister. Here's Pierre Poilievre today on Mark Carney and his conflicts of interest.
I mean, we've never seen a Prime Minister so conflicted as Mark Carney. He has ownership of a company that has been described as Canada's single biggest tax dodger. So how is it that he could possibly pass a budget or another amendment to the Income Tax Act in the interests of Canada when he knows that his personal financial interests depend on offshore tax havens that come at the expense of the Canadian people? He has Brookfield sitting at the table when his ministers are negotiating in China. Who's he negotiating for, Brookfield or Canadians? I mean, frankly, I have to be honest, I am stunned by how little scrutiny there has been of his personal financial interests and how they run in direct opposition to the national interests of this country. And I'm also stunned that the Prime Minister has used legalese to try and keep profiting himself at the expense of the public interest, rather than doing the honorable thing, which is to divest himself completely, sell all of his assets, and put it into a fully blind trust.
Canadians would trust Mark Carney if he had no financial interest in any of the business deals he's doing. But now that he secured his majority through floor crossers, unelected, just cross the floor, there's going to be even less scrutiny, and he has captured mainstream media. This is a reminder. Share my content with every person you know, because we're against the machine. The only way that I grow is through you. Mark Carney has almost 500,000 shares of Brookfield, $6.8 million US worth of the stock that we know of. There could be options and all sorts of things. We have no idea what he has. This is all that we know of. A brand new bombshell report, investigative report, was just dropped that reveals that Brookfield executives still have on-call demand access to Mark Carney. They press a button 24/7, could go straight to Mark Carney while he's sleeping, and he could be responding to the executives of Brookfield. Holy crap.
And just to comment after Madame Lapointe, in my role as chair, I'm not going to make any apologies for wanting to strengthen the Conflict of Interest Act and the rules that surround it. I happen to believe that Canadians need to have confidence in their designated public office holders. We heard testimony throughout the course of our study. One in particular disturbed me, and that was the fact that the Brookfield CFO had a meeting with Prime Minister Carney, basically the ability to make a phone call, and he ended up in the Prime Minister's office, despite the fact that an ethics screen has been set up against Brookfield. So I think that should concern anyone, that there's that much access to the Prime Minister's office.
If Mark Carney wants to remain Prime Minister of Canada, he needs to sell every single one of his Brookfield stocks and sever ties with the company completely. We cannot have a prime minister that is enriching himself on every single file he touches. Do you think liberal elbows up supporters know that their economic genius mathematician, the guy that's going to save Canada, is not saving anything except for his stock portfolio? Do they realize that they are getting tricked? He doesn't care about Canada. Everything he does is to enrich his stock portfolio. Donald Trump terminated all trade talks with Canada back in October because of Doug Ford's wonderful attack ad. Who could forget this?
Trump used that reason to abruptly end all trade talks with Canada. On Truth Social, he called Ontario's ad fake, called Canada's actions egregious, and then accused Canada of trying to interfere with the Supreme Court. And
Donald Trump has not talked to Canada since October because of that attack ad. Here we have Dominic LeBlanc explain that a couple 30-minute phone calls or some coffee or something is substantial negotiations between the two countries.
It's not the same circumstance as October, but to say that there are no conversations or I forget the exact phrase the ambassador said.
No serious negotiations.
Yeah,
because, so you disagree with it. What is happening? Because what you're describing right now is just talks. Like, people are talking. What do we take from that?
Well, but Secretary Lutnick or Ambassador Greer, if they didn't think there was some benefit, they're not going to have 45-minute meetings, 1-hour meetings, schedule other meetings with us if they didn't think it was serious. So, like, it's serious in the sense that we're discussing serious issues with them in active conversation. So I think that's serious. But I also recognize that what we thought was a circumstance last fall is now tied into the broader Kuzma review conversation. We're ready for those discussions. We're always ready and have been ready for a long time. So I'm not pessimistic, Vashi, about our ability to continue those negotiations. If we wanted to sign a bad deal or concede a whole bunch of things that wouldn't be in Canada's economic interest, we may have been able to sign a bad deal some time ago. But we've said that we're not going to do that, and we're not going to concede a series of things just to have another meeting to get another list of things that we should concede. That's not the way it's going to work.
Dominic LeBlanc has not provided one piece of evidence that they were talking in January for 1 hour, or February for 45 minutes, or even March. Were they talking in March? Probably not. They were on spring break. They have not spoken at all in 5 months. There is no talks. How could you even accept a bad deal if there's been zero communication for 5 straight months? You just had a 1 hour phone call recently. Now you're saying there's negotiations going on and we're not going to take a bad deal? Is anybody out there believing one piece of what he just said? Just one thing. You can't strike a deal if you're not even on the phone or even emails or have any negotiations. There is no deal. Here we have Mark Carney 2 days ago, and you're not actually going to believe this. Mark Carney has been Prime Minister of Canada for a full year with a mandate to get the very best deal with Donald Trump in the United States. That's why people elected Mark Carney. He says here, well, we're going to see what he says. You're not going to believe your ears.
For Canada-U.S. trade, we already have the BEC trade deal with the U.S., but we're just getting started. Mr. Speaker, it's a great...
What? We're just getting started. What have you been doing for the last 12 months? You're just getting started right now? We're 2 months away from the termination and ending of the USMCA July 1st. And you're just getting started? He just admitted they've been doing nothing for an entire year. Mainstream media was caught last year turning Pierre Poilievre orange so he looked like Donald Trump.
More laws, more agencies, more corporate buzzwords, or more abracadabra. What we need from this Prime Minister is one thing. Get out of the way.
2 people got fired. They also misrepresented what Pierre Poilievre said. Check out what's said in this committee.
In 2024, CTV News was caught altering a video clip of Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre. It maliciously misrepresented his words, and 2 people were fired over this. What's being done to ensure this kind of travesty never happens again?
So, you know, we took considerable and great steps, you know, in light of what transpired. We apologized for what transpired, and we did an immediate investigation that ultimately, as you said, led to the termination of 2 staff members. You know, I am on record with other House of Commons committees on this matter, as saying it is the first and only time in my career that I have ever seen anything like that happen. And, you know, I stand by that.
Peter Menzies, former CRTC vice chair, told this committee last week that he believes objectivity is gone from newsrooms. He said objectivity is, quote, an enormous challenge for public broadcasters. He also said most newsroom reporters on the center left politically. And I experienced that myself at a conservative newspaper years ago. What do you make of that, and what is CTV doing to ensure its journalists are objective?
So we have a number of guardrails in place at CTV. We have a news policy that has requirements with respect to you know, our creation of content. We adhere to the Canadian Association of Broadcasters Code of Ethics. We adhere to the RTDNA Canada Code of Ethics. And in addition, in the digital space, we are part of what is called the Trust Project. All of those spell out very clearly, you know, what is expected of journalism organizations and how journalists conduct themselves. You know, and I can say this, you know, in you know, any newsroom that I have ever been a part of, there is never been a conversation about the adoption of a a particular political point of view. In fact, quite the contrary. The conversation is always about, how do we ensure that all voices are heard?
I don't believe one word, not one word that he just said. I got some proof for you. I caught them again. Here's Pierre Poilievre just 4 days ago on CTV. Look at his skin color. Look what CTV did this time. He looks completely orange. They've turned him orange. Look at the guy behind Pierre Poilievre. His skin is white, pale white. So that you can see the side-by-side comparison. This is 4 days ago. This is a couple days ago on CTV. You literally cannot make this up, Canada. They're turning him into Donald Trump. Look, I've actually circled all the other people. They don't have this orange filter. Like I said, the guy in the back, look how white over here. It's like I said, they all look like Casper the Ghost next to him. Busted. So now that we know they're completely biased, bought off, paid off, whatever you want to call it, they're on the Liberal team. CTV executive says that they're losing $40 million a year and asking MPs for the same subsidies awarded to news publishers. There's a real fear that CTV is going to go under. Do you think it's a good idea that our government provides CTV more money? We have nonstop biased media in Canada, and CTV wants more money from the Liberals. So it's no surprise the public has renamed CTV to Control the Viewers. Pierre Poilievre has broken his silence about Mark Carney's conflicts of interest. Oh boy, check this out.
What do you think of the Ethics Committee recommendation that the Prime Minister should have to sell their portfolio since a blind trust is not true divestment?
I agree. I mean, we've never seen a prime minister so conflicted as Mark Carney. He has ownership of a company that has been described as Canada's single biggest tax dodger. So how is it that he could possibly pass a budget or another amendment to the Income Tax Act in the interests of Canada when he knows that his personal financial interests depend on offshore tax havens that come at the expense of the Canadian people? He has Brookfield sitting at the table when his ministers are negotiating in China. Who's he negotiating for, Brookfield or Canadians? I mean, frankly, I have to be honest, I am stunned by how little scrutiny there has been of his personal financial interests and how they run in direct opposition to the national interests of this country. And I'm also stunned that the Prime Minister has used legalese to try and keep profiting himself at the expense of the public interest, rather than doing the honorable thing, which is to divest himself completely, sell all of his assets, and put it into a fully blind trust.
I have a question for you. How is it even possible that there is just one Liberal supporter in Canada, given Mark Carney's enriching himself from his stock portfolio in Brookfield, and they're at meetings in China, and they could call him 24 hours a day and he could pick up to negotiate a win for Brookfield and not for Canada? The Liberal government announced they're going to be creating 100,000 temporary summer jobs for students, every single position. Every single one. I went onto the website and I took a look at Canada's summer jobs website, and it automatically puts all straight, white people applying at the very bottom of the list every single time. All of the jobs, if you're a straight white male, you are not getting a job. It only goes to these groups. You white man, you could easily just get a job. You're at the bottom of the list. Doug Ford thought it would be a genius idea to go on to CNN and bash Donald Trump for 7 straight minutes today. That's after he is the person responsible for the Ronald Reagan attack ad campaign, which terminated all trade negotiations with the United States for 5 months. But Mark Carney did see that attack ad, and he did say, yep, go ahead, Doug. Spend $75 million of our tax dollars on this attack ad during Super Bowl to really piss off Donald Trump. So Doug Ford goes on to CNN and thinks it's a good idea to remind Donald Trump about Ronald Reagan.
That's what he needs to focus on. I noticed he has a big picture of Ronald Reagan beside him. Maybe he should have a conversation with him or pull up some of the conversations Ronald Reagan had with the American people. It wasn't about killing trade, it was about expanding trade. And if he took a page out of Ronald Reagan's book, the whole world would be better, not to mention the relationship with Canada and the U.S.
I don't know what to say. Do you think Doug Ford bashing Donald Trump for 7 straight minutes, then bringing back Ronald Reagan was a good idea? This is a complete disaster. Here's Doug Ford's post before he went on to CNN. How clueless is this guy? He just makes things worse and worse. How exactly is limiting the choice of Canadians gonna make Trump drop tariffs? This guy's just antagonizing Donald Trump. RMC86 on X did a great job clipping Dominic LeBlanc and Greer in the United States. This is an eye-opener.
If there is no consensus or agreement amongst the 3 parties to the trilateral agreement, we fall into a 10-year period where the treaty remains in effect until 2036, and there are annual reviews that theoretically occur after that date.
We're kind of at the end of our rope in just asking for them to do this. Think about it this way. There are 2 countries that have retaliated economically against the United States in the past year, the People's Republic of China and Canada. So that's kind of the company that they're running in, where they want to have more trade agreements with more countries. They're doubling down on globalization when we're trying to correct for the problems of globalization. So those are 2 models that don't fit together very well.
These are 2 models that don't fit very well. No wonder Mark Carney says there's a rupture. He's moving us away from the United States and straight into China's arms. Mark Carney's Justin Trudeau 2.0.
We're seeing a similar thing happen right now with President Trump threatening the Canadian auto industry, where we're now having to look at working with China because the American industry doesn't want to work with us anymore. And the big example we get right now is on aluminum. Anyone who knows the aluminum industry knows that Canada has, for decades, been one of the great places to make aluminum in the world. Massive amounts of hydroelectricity, access to the raw materials meant that we are a strong, clean, reliable supplier of aluminum that America, the United States, would buy massively from us. Well, the U.S. recently decided to put 50% tariffs on Canadian aluminum, and though suddenly the Americans weren't buying aluminum from Canada anymore, they were looking at trying to increase their own production, which is not easy to do because electricity is so expensive in the States and not as clean. And the Europeans sort of came to us and said, hey, wait, you make the cleanest aluminum in the world and you're not able to sell it to the U.S., will you sign a deal with us? We said, absolutely.
Mark Carney's selling us to Europe and China. Nothing has changed. The Liberals say changes to the House committees will put an end to the silly partisan games so they could ram through their George Orwell 1984 bills without any scrutiny, attacking our free speech or religious freedoms. There will be zero due process now. The thing is, never in Canadian history has a majority been gained through floor crossers. This is unprecedented times because the people of Canada voted for a minority government. They did not vote to have the committees stacked by Liberals. We haven't seen this guy in a while, and I wish we hadn't seen him again. Unfortunately, he surfaced today. Mr. Frog, Greg Fergus himself, comes out and says this.
If we do a little thought experiment on this, imagine if we had won the election with a clear majority in 2025 during the general election. We would have been majority for committees. And imagine if people were dissatisfied in the caucus and they left the caucus and we became minority. Clearly, everybody would be calling for us to change the committee structure with reason. Anyway, see you later.
That's useful. Thank you, Greg. I appreciate it.
That's not useful. That's actually not useful. Why did I say it's not useful? It's because if there was a majority and then it fell down to a minority government, the chances of there being an election and a non-confidence vote would be sky high. There would be an election immediately because the confidence in the government would fall. So Greg Fergus and this reporter, oh, so useful, so useful. How much did he get paid to say that? And Greg Fergus, remember he was the House Speaker and he was supposed to be unbiased? He is the biggest liberal bootlicker on the planet. That's it for today's report. Isn't it incredible that Brookfield could phone Mark Carney 24 hours a day and he'll pick up? And he also invites them to China to be part of the top secret negotiations. We have a blind trust prime minister, which knows exactly what's in his portfolio and making decisions to enrich himself instead of doing what's right for Canada. And we have El Bozos across the country clapping like seals, supporting Mark Carney with blindfolds on their face. The only reason that Mark Carney was elected is because of fear of Donald Trump. Orange man bad. Because the Liberals cannot run on their last decade track record, Canada in every single metric has fallen considerably. For example, just the happiness scale from 5th place down to 34th place. And for our Canadian youth, it's all the way down to 71st place. Lower than third world countries. We're not happy in Canada. We are not happy in Canada. But it doesn't matter about happiness because that orange guy down south, the only person that can negotiate a win with him is an economic genius that doesn't know how to do math. The only thing he knows how to do is make sure that Canadians' fear of Donald Trump is at 1,000%. So nobody asks him about his Brookfield stock portfolio that is going sky high in value. What's your thought on not speaking to Donald Trump or the United States for 5 straight months? And all of a sudden they're like, everything's fine. But the US side says everything's not fine. Your economy that you're building is in complete opposite of the direction we are going. Mark Carney agrees it's a rupture. We need to move away and diversify our trade. If the United States decides to shut their door on July 1st, Canada's economy will not be in a depression. It will be finished. I look forward to hearing from you in the comment section. I'll see you on the next report.